move on to our next presenter, Nick Stuber, who is with the Colorado Health Foundation. And Nick helps the staff at CHF focus the team in the design and refinement of strategies focused on achieving health equity and social justice. And he creates and implements comprehensive learning and evaluation plans to both inform future strategy work and assess existing work in the areas of affordable housing, access to primary care, youth and young adult behavioral health and resiliency, policy and advocacy, and nonprofit capacity building, including efforts to advance justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. He also supports aspects of the foundation's internal capacity building around evidence of learning, equitable evaluation, community engagement, and application of systems thinking and power analysis. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick, who is the Senior Learning and Evaluation Officer for Colorado Health Foundation. Welcome, Nick.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me. And good afternoon, everyone, as well, too. I have a presentation here that I will bring up. I hope everyone can see. And today I am going to talk to you all about some of the work that the Colorado Health Foundation is doing around affordable housing. And we're leading with this, the name of this presentation was, What Does Success Look Like? So wanting to take you through the evaluative work in particular that the foundation is doing on one element of its housing work. There's a lot of work going on currently that we're supporting in affordable housing. And this will be a deep dive into one element that we found was pretty successful in a pretty interesting and innovative way to address housing issues within Colorado. So before I get into those details, I just wanted to start out with an overview of the foundation as a whole. And so on this slide here, you can see some of the information about our vision, mission, what we call our rally cry, our values and our cultural attributes that really undergird the foundation's work. So, our key rally cry, is bringing health and reach for all Coloradans. The key mission is to improve the health of Coloradans. And the sort of core belief is that health is a basic human right. And these are aspects that guide all of our work. This gives a high-level overview of our funding priorities. So they're really in four major buckets of work. The housing work that I'm going to be focusing on today falls under the strengthening community health area of our work, along with access to food and food security, and our community solutions work, which is work that is driven by local communities around the state of Colorado. And then you'll see we also work in some of these other areas as well. They're specific topic areas, and then we also have cross-cutting work that we support as well that is very locally and community focused around various communities in Colorado. So the cornerstones of our work are these three. Again, these are three key areas that make up the foundation of all the work the foundation does. So we serve Coloradans who have less power and privilege and income. We specifically prioritize Coloradans of color. We're informed by the community and those we exist to serve. And we do everything with the intent of creating health equity. We're a health-focused foundation, and so health equity is the ultimate aim that we have across all of our work. And then the last piece that I'll just share is our working definitions, rather, of health equity, and then racial justice, which we really see as we're achieving in parallel on our way to achieving health equity. So we define health equity is that it exists when there are no unnecessary, unavoidable, unfair, unjust, or systemically caused differences in health status, and that racial justice exists when there is not only the absence or alteration of systems that create and perpetuate racial disparities in areas including health, education, and wealth, but the presence of transformed and fundamentally different systems that operate on behalf of and inclusive of communities of color. So with that, I'm now going to dive into the affordable housing strategy work. And on this slide here, this gives an overview of the ultimate future change that we're aiming to contribute to through our affordable housing work. And specifically, it's focused on Coloradans who live on low income and are excluded based on their race and ethnicity, that they have really three main things. So one is high quality, safe, and affordable housing that supports their health, economic well-being, and dignity, that they have the power to shape and achieve the housing solutions they prefer and deserve, and that they have the ability to influence and change the policy systems and environments that surround housing. And when we say, when it comes to low income, individuals living on low income, we're specifically thinking about households living below 80% AMI and spending over 30% of their household income on housing. So that's the metric or measure we use to define that. And then we have three major pathways of our work that all of our additional actions sit under. So one is to support models or approaches that increase or preserve the inventory of high quality, safe, and affordable housing, and when applicable, include services to address the other social determinants of health. Our other major pathways supporting policies and practices at the local, state, and federal level focus on equitable, affordable, and community-centered housing. And then our last one is to build public support for affordable housing by using CHF's voice to cultivate public will and support the voices of others working to advance affordable housing. So I could go into a lot more detail on all of these, but today we're really just focusing on aspects of that very first box. So this idea of supporting models and approaches around increasing affordable housing. And the one that I'm going to specifically dive into is the community land trust model. So before I get into the specifics of the project we supported, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the model itself. It was established in the late 1960s by civil rights activists in recognition that denying property rights is a way to reinforce the white supremacist dynamics at the time and the exclusion that was occurring when it came to accessing housing and land, particularly farmland as well too. And community land trusts, for those of you who are not familiar with them, they're nonprofit community-based organizations that are designed to ensure community stewardship of land. So the way they work is that a trust acquires land and maintains ownership of it permanently. With prospective homeowners, it is able to ensure a long-term renewable lease instead of a traditional sale. So that's how people are able to access the land. And then when the homeowner sells, the family earns a portion of the increased property value, and then the remainder is kept by the trust to preserve the affordability for future to low income moderate families. So the idea behind this is that it really decouples the ownership of land and housing, and the trust really prevents or helps mitigate market factors from causing prices to rise significantly, which helps guarantee that the housing will remain affordable for future generations. They're increasingly, there's an element of this work, I should say rather, that can help protect against gentrification and the resulting displacement that occurs. It's definitely not a panacea, but it is one element amongst others that can help guard against this. It can also enable an amount of equity building, which is extremely important to individuals and who are able to access this. And it can also help set up people to move to market rate homes when the time comes, and if they so want to do that, or they can pass on the home that's on the land trust to their heirs. So it really does have the potential to start to mitigate or reduce this wealth gap that we see so prominently, particularly amongst people of color when it comes to housing. So then the specific trust that I'm going to talk about is the Chaffee Housing Trust. And I'll give a little bit of background about Chaffee County, where the trust is located, that just helps sort of set the stage for why this type of model was needed. The Chaffee Housing Needs Assessment reported that, overall, like so many communities across Colorado, housing is not affordable to most residents. and specifically including a workforce that's really critical to the local tourist economy within this area. So of the households earning less than $35,000 per year, 1/3 have left the county. It's been replaced by newly arrived high-income residents. And these low-wage workers are really the engine of the tourist economy within Chaffee County, whose primary economic driver is one of tourism. And many employers are reporting that they're not able to find workers needed for current business activity. So there's a key gap on that side as well. And then the other piece I'll highlight from the Chaffee Housing Needs Assessment is that there's 2,400 cost burden households in the county who pay more than they can afford on housing. So again, that's the 30% of their gross monthly income goes to covering housing. And currently, and these numbers actually might even be outdated at this point, but some of the latest that I was able to find is that the average home price sale is almost $400,000 in Salida, and then it's around $350 in Buena Vista. And so the income that's actually required for those homes is just not reachable for many, many people who live in this area. And so there's a clear need that was identified. And one of the models of interest that was launched within this is the Chaffee Housing Trust, or CHT, which is how I'll refer to it for the rest of this presentation. And it really serves community members living on low income in both Chaffee and Lake counties. Home ownership and rentals of homes are restricted to households earning less than 80% AMI. And the Colorado Health Foundation's relationship with CHT really began with informal conversations between the two organizations a number of years ago. And the foundation really just initially wanted to learn more about the community land trust model and how they could best contribute to supporting CHT. And so eventually, over a course of conversations, the foundation was able to figure out really two critical ways, both financial and non-financial, to support the Chaffee Housing Trust. And ultimately, this fit with the emerging idea when the foundation was really just starting to think about entering affordable housing, that it was really interested in the community land trust model as a way to support affordable housing for low-income residents, especially in rural areas around the state. Now, there's some nuance around this that I'll share towards the end of the presentation, but it seemed like a compelling model for both the need and then also the geography. So the key evaluation questions regarding the foundation's support of the Chaffee Housing Trust are noted here in orange, and they're rather broad but really do encompass some of the key aspects of what we are interested in learning from this work. So one was just overall, what contribution did CHF, the Colorado Health Foundation, make to the Chaffee Housing Trust? What difference ultimately did the support make? What is the benefit of the community land trust model as seen through the Chaffee Housing Trust? What is the stabilization that it offers? And then what additional supports, if any, are needed to thrive once homeowners have stabilized housing via this model? So the first piece that I just want to start is, what was the impact of the Colorado Health Foundation's financial contributions? There were a few, the package of financial contributions mainly included what's called a program-related investment that the foundation gave as part of its package. And then there was some other funding as well that was mixed in with that. And some of the key highlights from that is it first and foremost really allowed the purchase of land to build additional housing. The Chaffee Housing Trust was able to act very quickly to purchase the land, to purchase additional land that was available before anyone else could. And this was critical for them because traditionally it would have taken them months to get money together for a land purchase. They would have had to have gone through this extended process, and this infusion of capital that the foundation was able to offer really allowed them to expand on the land that was part of this. And the funds, they not only enabled the community land trust to secure units, additional units, by covering the costs of new building, again, that they otherwise would not have been able to. So the funds enabled them to secure units at a negotiated fixed price really at a time when construction costs were increasing. So this was another ability where they were able to lock this in with funds, which staff from the trust really felt was critical. It also helped them to grow and hire additional staff. And so specifically, they were able to hire a Spanish-speaking member of staff to focus on the client services end in serving Spanish speakers, which was a gap that was able to be filled with this. And then it also enabled the Chaffee Housing Trust to better service clients. So Spanish-speaking clients overall, but just the whole range of clients that they serve. And then it's also been used for office space and support for consultants as well, too. And then the other piece that was really critical is the money that was provided really helped structure a relationship with one of the local banks that enabled low-income homeowners to secure mortgages. This was another highlighted by staff as another key piece because it provided some level of legitimacy for CHT to develop this connection with the local bank. And it allowed the trust itself not to take on a huge amount of risk where it was being backed by the funding from the foundation. And so there was a higher willingness for these mortgages to be made. So it was able to sort of fill that gap that allowed people to access homes. So this is the bulk of the work was really devoted to this. What were the benefits to the homeowners? And I'll step back a moment before I go into detail here because I forgot to highlight this when I was talking about the evaluation questions. But this project was evaluated by external researchers that the foundation partnered with, and they really took a case study approach to this, the Chaffee Housing Trust. And so they did in-depth evaluations with homeowners, with staff, and with some members of the community within Chaffee County to really ask about all of these levels of contribution and impact that were going on. And they also did pretty in-depth document review as well, too, on the Community Land Trust model and then on the Chaffee Housing Trust itself. So that was the actual approach, methodological approach to this. It was heavy on a qualitative analysis of and really wanting to suss out the stories that were being told about this impact. So the first key impact that was really noted, and this one might be pretty obvious, is that it immediately allowed people to access affordable housing. And not only just to access it, but it allowed for people to live in the communities that they work, which within this area of the state is a critical piece. And then unlike, excuse me, other affordable housing models, the community land trust really can help create housing that is permanently affordable. Again, because of the way it's structured, where the trust owns the land, they're able to really have long-term affordability in place with this model from the beginning. The other piece that I'll just highlight is this alleviation of financial stress is one of the other key pieces in addition to actually access the housing that homeowners highlighted. So owning a home rather than renting enabled CHT homeowners to start to build equity. This opened up new opportunities for homeowners. For example, many now have the opportunity to pass on some level of wealth to subsequent generations, to their children, grandchildren. It allowed to sell their home in the future and release equity so that they can purchase another property or to take out additional loans as well. And so one example that was shared around this was someone was thinking about starting their own business and taking out a business loan. So there's this ability to sort of open up other doors that they simply would have not had access to before. The other key piece was this idea of increased stability and security for a few specific areas, namely work, education, mental and physical health, and leisure. So the reports from homeowners at this point related to work is that people were able to become more embedded in the local community, which really had a positive impact on their association and connection to work and employment. In addition, employers knew that their employees were less likely to suddenly leave when they had stabilized housing. And this made employers more willing to actually invest in employees as well. In terms of education, when families knew that they were staying in one place and they had that stability, that predictable stability, it allowed children to concentrate on school instead of worrying about housing. So this ties back to these connections to education that we heard in earlier presentations. We definitely see this here. In terms of mental and physical health, home ownership had a positive impact on people's overall mental health in terms of reductions in anxiety, stress, reported anxiety, stress. Homeowners share that they just felt good about being a homeowner. They had this positive impact on how they viewed themselves, and again, helped stabilize the anxiety that they had when they were not in a stable housing situation. The frequent moves can have a negative impact on health. And the other key piece as well, too, is when people are able to stabilize and be in one place, it allows them to form connections with local doctors and other healthcare in a way that they're simply not able to before. Now, this last piece, I thought there's a couple of pieces towards the end of this list that I thought was interesting. One was around this idea of leisure. With homeowners being able to access the community housing trust homes, there was definitely this increased sense of security, and it had a positive impact on people's ability to enjoy leisure time. So we heard stories of people able to spend more time with their children, more time with their friends, able to go out and do fun things, go to the park, go out and enjoy nature. Another person shared how they had space to have people stay in their home so they could actually host people. And yet another homeowner shared that without the stress of paying rent, they could take off evenings to spend it with their friends, to go on vacation. This was definitely not one of the outcomes when we were designing this evaluation it was top of mind for us. We definitely talked about, work, mental and physical health, financial security. But I thought this idea of leisure that for people who are housed, it's often taken for granted, was a really interesting set of stories for us to hear, that it allowed people to really feel more human in a lot of ways and enjoy these moments away from worry, away from work, and just being able to relax, which also had an impact on their overall well-being. The two other pieces that I want to highlight three other pieces, is this also offered stability during the pandemic. Some homeowners were able to take breaks from paying their mortgage during this time. They also were housed as well, too. So we saw the protective effects of this in the throes of the pandemic, or at the height, rather, of the pandemic. And then the other two pieces that I thought were interesting was the sort of confidence in the future outlook for individuals and their families. And then also to this idea of increased social cohesion, civic engagement, and advocacy around housing and within the community. And specifically, homeowners have been given opportunities through the Chaffee Housing Trust to build their public speaking, leadership, and advocacy skills. They were able to advocate in the local region and the local area for additional affordable housing. Some were stepping into local leadership positions. They were also gaining experience in going to local meetings, city council meetings, speaking on behalf of people who live at the Chaffee Housing Trust, and just forging a deeper connection to sort of the civic opportunities that were there. And then the other piece that I'll highlight too is that, and I think this is interesting with the community land trust model, is that it really does help forge a sense of community within the homeowners themselves. So they're able to share their experiences. Their proximity to one another allows them to see each other on a daily basis. And just overall, they're able to develop these deeper social connections and social cohesion within their neighborhoods, which, based on the research and literature, we know has another positive impact on health as well, too, health and well-being. So this was another area that, again, was not at the top of our minds when we were designing the evaluation. It was really kind of one of those, in some ways, unintended consequences that we were thinking about when we initially set out to look at the impact of this work. So any project is not without its challenges. As I said at the beginning, the community land trust model is not a panacea. It is not right in every situation, depending on the local context that is present. And there are also some key challenges that even when it seems like the right model, that really have to be acknowledged. One of the big ones that we see, and this is very true in Colorado, is that the price of land makes keeping homes affordable difficult. And so the challenge is really finding the affordable land and ensuring that it's connected to local amenities. Land is expensive, and if it's not already connected to infrastructure like water, gas, sewage, there's additional expense involved in building up or connecting to that infrastructure. Local municipalities can support organizations to build affordable housing by using policy to encourage county growth in areas that can easily be connected to infrastructure, but not all municipalities do this. One of the other aspects is the contours or dynamics of the local economy. These interviewees who we connected to through the evaluation shared that it can be a really deep challenge finding builders in rural areas because there's more money to be made in more metropolitan areas. And the scale of the economy in rural areas means that local municipalities are not always able to contribute financially to projects like the Community Land Trust. The other key challenge is staffing the land trust. For the Chaffee Housing Trust, it took time to find a candidate who could offer the skills that were needed, was willing to live in a rural area, and was willing to take the risk of working for a small organization, particularly at the beginning where it wasn't a guarantee this would be a success. And then finally, the lesson that I would highlight is the changing perceptions of homeowners. House prices are so high and ownership feels so out of reach for a lot of people that a lot of local people do not believe that they could ever own a home. So this public perception is a really critical issue that we see again in a lot of areas of our work and tied to this one as well too. As one leader from the Community Housing Trust directly shared that people have struggled for so long to access housing that they really just think it's the norm. It's just become a way of existing. And so they don't think that they could ever own a house. And many people have just become convinced that this is the reality. And so convincing people in local communities that this can occur is a persistent informational challenge that has to be overcome. And it is one that the foundation, through some of its other area of work around public perception, around strategic communications, is also looking at as well too, is how can we start to influence and push norms around this aspect of home ownership when we look at the different areas of our work. So the last thing that I will just highlight here at the end is this idea of, and we've heard this throughout today's presentation, but housing really as a multifaceted platform for accessing all these other aspects that we discussed. So health, wealth, community, and connection. And then from the perspective of the foundation, most importantly, equity and justice as well too. And so as we build out our housing work at the foundation, and as we evaluate our housing work, we're really using this platform mentality. So we're not just looking at the quantitative side of this in terms of dollars invested and return on impact. All of those pieces are important, but we're also really wanting to interrogate and push and look at some of these other dynamics that are outside of the immediate economic impacts as well. So specifically, impact on physical and mental health, connection to community. What is the impact at a community level on the fabric of local communities? And how does that in turn benefit the health and well-being of people? And then also, how can this model also starting to, go back to where particularly the community land trust model initially came from, with this focus on racial justice and equity. How can we continue to propagate that side of this as well, knowing that a number of those inequities we're still dealing with, whether that's in housing or any other area of the social determinants of health as well too. So that's the other critical piece with us. So I would just, the final thing I'll say in closing is for us, getting that qualitative assessment and that storytelling is critically important to our work, because not only does it help really get to the detail of the impacts that people experience, it also can help flow into this idea of starting to push and change the norms around affordable housing, and being able to really lift up stories, share stories widely, and give people spaces to tell their story, and about how they were able to ultimately access housing and the difference that it made for them. So with that, I will end, and thank you all for the time this afternoon.
Terrific. Thank you, Nick. I'm again going to open it up for any questions that folks may have. So please type that into the chat. In the meantime, Nick, if you could maybe just touch base on other initiatives that the foundation is working on. Obviously, you highlighted the Chaffee Housing Trust, but what other initiatives is the foundation working on across the state right now?
Yeah, no, thanks, Joe, for that. And I saw it was within the presentation that Dr. Resnick did. They highlighted the Indeed Well work, which was another one that we had supported a few years ago too. That was another really compelling model, both in terms of affordable housing and then workforce as well too. So that was one that was recently happened that was pretty big. The other key piece that we're looking at now as well too is mobile home parks, and looking at how can we ensure that they are stable, they are safe spaces for people to live, and given the opportunity that people can actually own, you can have ownership of the mobile home spaces as well too. And so, these models, and this is the community housing or community land trust falls underneath this too, looking at models that are more cooperative in nature, that are challenging what is the typical, market-based private commodification of housing, and really wanting to support more innovative ideas that try to work outside of those bounds. And so whether that is through a trust, through a church donating land, right, that they want more cooperatively owned, there's a number of different areas that we're looking at to support that around the state. And then I'll also say too, we're really, and this ties back to the previous presentation too, we're trying to really pay close attention to various federal monies that are coming down, and how we can help influence those streams, and help bring our perspective in terms of working within the affordable housing space to that. And the other thing that I'll say, this isn't immediate work that we did, but it was, again, in the very recent past, was there was a lot of support, financial support we had given out right at the beginning of COVID, in the first few months that had followed as well too, around homelessness, around safe outdoor spaces, all of the emergency needs that just really exploded at that time, was a major part of our support as well too. Yes, so that's just some flavoring, Joe, of the work. There's other things too, but I'll stop there. Like I said, we could spend a whole much more time on all those other areas, but I'll stop there just to give some idea of where we're headed. So.
Terrific. Thanks, Nick. And Nikki, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Are you seeing any questions? Okay. Well, with that, again, thank you, Nick, for that update from the foundation.